When you really think about it, there are tons of different genres of video games out there. You might not think that if you spend enough time looking at upcoming releases or new reveals at E3 and the ridiculous number of shooters with crafting mechanics on the way, but it's a testament to the medium that so many different kinds of games can exist. Whether or not developers actually want to make interesting titles with unique mechanics and not just stick with tried and tested formulas that operate as the safe option is the ultimate question, with a depressing answer.
I've long maintained that video games come in cycles and that what's popular and hilariously oversaturated currently will eventually wither and die only to be replaced by the next new shiny thing. I'd say we're currently in the age of the Battle Royale games. Thank God I'm not talking about those this week.
Of course, it wasn't very long ago at all that every franchise under the sun was trying to get in on the open world trend, where advances in technology and enough prior pathfinding had made the prospect of a giant overworld to explore incredibly inviting for most games out there. You can go wherever you want, whenever you want. Who wouldn't want to get in on something like that? It's in fact such a brilliant base concept that the bad examples of the genre tend to stick out like the sorest of thumbs. You end up with games that are just kind of big, but with no reason for being that way, like some gross overcompensation for all these other shortcomings. Considering how much of a time sink these kind of games can be, you'd hate to waste so much on a game that never really proves its worth. Alternatively, you can watch a 15-minute video and find out which games you might want to avoid. It's a decent value proposition. I may have referred to it as such, but I don't think you can really describe open world as a genre of video game, if just because non-linearity isn't a type of game. That's like saying that multiplayer is a genre of video game when it's more of a feature or an enabler for other fun things to happen within a game. This is important because you often see open worlds stuck onto genres that don't immediately seem like they'd see any great benefit from having a larger overworld. Usually this kind of feature would be limited to adventure games, but Dying Light showed that survival horror could get in on the act as well. Racing games are another intriguing proposal that immediately sounds dodgy, but can be done well if you use the act of driving around an open world to your advantage. Hey, GTA gets by with all this aimless driving, it can't be that hard surely. And yet perhaps a game like the third Driver game, however the hell you pronounce it, can be used to demonstrate what GTA did so well and what fell apart in this game. For a start, Rockstar actually managed to finish a few of their games, whereas Driv 3R was rushed out so that it was released before GTA San Andreas, and somewhat inevitably, the torrents of glitches and unfinished mechanics put a giant dampener on most of this game. There's some great ideas here that are never fully realized, like the damage sustained by your vehicle actually being reflected as marks on the bodywork, but not enough time and effort was put into other parts of Driver 3, like the open world, for example. It's big, but all it does is give you a large area to explore and gradually uncover all of the little faults that go a long way towards ruining this game. This level of freedom does more to expose Driv 3's issues than let you enjoy yourself. I think they were going for a similarly large city backdrop as Grand Theft Auto in order to make you feel home on the city streets, but I don't want to see that much of this game. Like, it tries, and I commend it for that, but it just doesn't work in any way. Maybe some of the money spent buying positive reviews should have been funneled back into giving the dev team more time and resources. It's just a suggestion.
Riding on the coattails of an infinitely more popular game is a fairly common tactic, as we'll find out later, but it does cause an unnecessary shift in perspective, because suddenly the next Driver game is an awful lot like GTA, and that is a hard matchup, because Rockstar put an awful lot of effort into making their open worlds vibrant and interesting, and you have to match or beat that. I'm gonna spoil it for you, you're probably not gonna win.
Over the years, as technology has made giant strides forward, we've started to develop a bit of a dick measuring competition when it comes to the size of a game's overworld. I remember when Xenoblade Chronicles X came out a couple of years ago, and all the headlines were about how massive this world is and how much space there is for you to explore, but that isn't very important. There needs to be a purpose behind having a large overworld to roam around, since exploration only becomes valued if it has a purpose. Give me shit to do, not just forests and deserts to stumble around in. I've heard there's shit to do in Metal Gear Survive, but no, there isn't. I pray for a day, one day in the future, that I don't have to talk about Metal Gear Survive and can instead pretend that this franchise went to live on a farm upstate. But until then, well, here we are. Fresh off the last Metal Gear game, Konami decided to give Survive a similarly large open world to act as an enjoyable background for all of the zany adventures that I'm sure you'll be having. However, the gigantic difference between these two games is that Survive is a game that requires you to not die, and so what you need from the overworld is a whole load of supplies that are scattered throughout this needlessly large landscape. You aren't exploring a world because you want to, you're exploring a world because you'll die very quickly if you don't. Throw in Metal Gear Survive's other glaring problems like your character having a pipette for a stamina gauge, and the stupid blurring effect when you start getting hungry, and merely navigating this world is a chore that I'd prefer to avoid at all costs. Konami were given something as exciting as the Fox engine and used it to make a by-the-numbers zombie survival game. That's like sticking Wagyu beef into a blender and making it into a smoothie. There's some things that you just don't do in this world.
We've reached a strange impasse where every game that has even the tiniest amount of exploration in it, that game has to be open world, and that is a dangerous precedent to set. It's almost like you have to give someone a giant playground before they have any fun whatsoever. And that's dangerous, because not every game really is made for open world, and not every developer actually knows what they're doing.
And not every game needs to be open world. I want to make that clear before we go any further, because I feel like that little detail gets overlooked when a group of executives sit down and say, make game like other game, and then money? I mean, games like Breath of the Wild and even Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain make a lot of sense because the core gameplay is fed through an open world to give the player a ton of control over how they'd like to go about defeating bad guys. But this doesn't work if you don't consider the changes that have to be made to quite a lot of things. I remember hearing sometime last year that the next Dynasty Warriors game is due to defy some fairly rock-solid convention by expanding things out a bit to help incorporate an open world. And that's surprising, since Dynasty Warriors famously doesn't do massive overhauls in design very often choosing to pump out game after game that look and play very similarly. And now we know why. I actually really admire the ambition on display here. Sure, the end result is sloppy at best and painfully boring at worst, and you absolutely can't award points just because one of the developers hit shuffle on Omega Force's ideas machine, but I can appreciate the shift in direction after so many years of relative safety. In the same way that I appreciate anyone who subscribes to my channel if they've enjoyed this video and clicks that little bell to receive notifications of every new upload. Except with Dynasty Warriors 9, there was a lot less promise or guarantee of any kind of consistency going forward. To put it plainly, Dynasty Warriors is a franchise that shouldn't be open world, and the original announcement came with a lot of justified trepidation over what kind of game we'd end up with. Then again, it's a concept that feels appropriate considering the sheer size of China, and the scenario of riding from one province to the next, leaving behind nothing but conquered land is theoretically awesome, but no one knew what they were doing here. The large map only serves to make most of the game feel empty and unfinished, and you lose the momentum of previous games in favor of a series of disjointed battles that don't feel connected in any way. You spend an age riding to the next area, defeat some random bad guys, and move on. That is effectively it, and if that sounds like an unsatisfying gameplay loop, then you are a breathing, functioning human being, my friend. You have a country-sized overworld, but you forgot to put anything inside it. That's like the first rule of making an open world game. Size does not matter. Content does. Stop pretending that a big overworld is an excuse to be lazy. With any big trend, you naturally get a whole host of games that ride the latest trend in whatever direction it's heading. You get a similar scenario when YouTubers make videos about whatever the popular trend of the moment is and experience a lot of success from it. Oh, so that's how you do it. I think it's unfair to refer to these games as copycats, since often the similarities are only on the very basic surface level, but also because it makes a lot of financial sense to do this. Ubisoft liked it so much they copy and pasted the same formula 22 million times for all of their intellectual properties, with every Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, Tom Clancy's Watch Dogs title all blending together as almost the same game. Hey, it's okay if you copy yourself. Not so okay if you genuinely copy someone else though.
Before Skyrim was being this awesome landmark for open world games, the fourth Elder Scrolls game, Oblivion, was doing a pretty dynamite job of showing the people of 2006 what life would be like 10 years in the future. It was pretty ahead of its time, and it shouldn't come as much surprise that rivals wanted in on the action. Especially the Oblivion Killer.
Most of the time you can assume with authority that any game that is being billed either by the press or the marketing team themselves as a killer of a pre-existing popular game isn't quite as good as people would like. I think I'm right in saying that there was a fair degree of excitement surrounding the 2007 release of the hit action RPG Two Worlds, with its fluid combat, its cutting-edge graphics, and its taint. Unsurprisingly, a lot of the confidence surrounding Two Worlds was horrendously misplaced, and that comparisons to massive fantasy RPGs like Oblivion weren't particularly flattering and served to reveal just how far below par Two Worlds actually is. Most of this game is terrible, but I'm reminded of just how poorly constructed its open world was, since you could theoretically go anywhere, but the game would throw incredibly hard enemies at you as soon as you deviated even slightly from the expected path. You might be overcome by an urge to clumsily stagger around a world that looks like it's rendering as you go, but oops! You'll have to take it on with a horribly imprecise combat system that involves a lot of flailing about, hoping that something dies in front of you, as you do battle with the other great obstacle in this game, the piss-poor frame rate. In short, exploring isn't fun because you'll probably die from it, and even if you don't, you're still spending your time playing Two Worlds, so no one's a winner. Except for that one guy who convinced the right people to let him make a sequel, which actually wasn't terrible. Would not have bet on that. Still though, Oblivion on steroids? Not the drug I would have chosen. So, I've been struggling with a dilemma recently. If I was making this video a few months ago, I would have slammed No Man's Sky into the #1 slot without thinking and gone about my day as normal. Fully content in the knowledge that one of the most disappointing and mind-numbingly dull video games was in its rightful place. However, recently Hello Games and founder Sean Murray have moved to change the public's perception of No Man's Sky with the latest batch of free game-changing updates and have papered over a lot of cracks. The No Man's Sky of 2018 is still short of the game a lot of us had in our heads, but at least it doesn't grind me down into a cynical mush like the original game did. Unfortunately, that leaves me without a #1 spot, and I don't know, I really enjoyed talking about how shit No Man's Sky was. I've lost a void in my life that I'm never gonna get back. Luckily, there's another bad game out there that also underwent major changes. And it was still terrible. And I suppose loosely related to No Man's Sky, since people compare that game to Sea of Thieves from this year, which is about pirates, as is Raven's Cry, or as it's known these days because the devs wanted to distance themselves from the shockingly awful Raven's Cry, Vendetta, Curse of Raven's Cry. They didn't try very hard, did they? The devs also didn't try very hard with other aspects of the game, like the animations, or sound design, or all types of artificial intelligence, or appropriately, the open world aspect. Yeah, apparently every pirate-themed video game has to be open world, so you can get that fix of adventure as you sail the seas and launch cannons at everything that moves. But the outstanding issue with Raven's Cry is that while you do have access to all these areas, they're all as equally shitty and broken as each other. It's like how Driver 3 has some technical problems, but significantly worse in every department. And I think that points to a bigger problem at play here. You see, open world games have never been the most technically flawless types of games out there, and they were never likely to be either. When you start spreading your resources out across a wide playing area, you will always encounter glitches or optimization errors or other goofs in the game's code. Most of the time, a player is willing to put up with a few bugs as long as the overall experience of exploring this ambitious world rises to the top. Hence why Bethesda are still making Elder Scrolls and Fallout games. Raven's Cry is a fantastic example of just how thin and patchy a game can be if you end up expanding things too far for the amount of manpower on the dev team. This kind of game is clearly possible given the existence of a certain pretty amazing Assassin's Creed game, but there's a huge disparity between the size of the teams behind the respective games. In the end, Ravenscry bit off way too much and choked out shortly after. Here's a lady peeing into a bush.
This is RabbidLuigi, and I almost feel sorry for Reality Pump Studios who developed Ravenscry, because they clearly had a vision for some kind of exciting pirate game, but they just couldn't really bring it together in the end, either through lack of experience or just lack of manpower and the ability to make this game. And, you know, it's hard to salvage anything from this game of any note, but hopefully they can, you know, improve in the future and make something exciting sometime down the line. I'm sure there's a game coming up of theirs that they can be excited for and that we can be excited for. And no, wait, hang on, stop. Can we look at that again? Oh no.
Have you got a topic that you'd like me to talk about next week? Make sure you leave a comment about that down below, because I'll be taking the most interesting suggestions and making a poll on the next video. In fact, here's one right now that I prepared from last week. I'll be revealing the winner of the poll on Twitter and taking suggestions for games to talk about that are related to that topic. So feel free to follow me over there so we can keep in touch. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.